Speaking Human.
Today on Speaking Human, we take a bite out of the latest Apple event to find out if the products and presentation from Tim Cook and company live up to the mammoth media buzz. Apples.
Speaking Human.
Welcome to Speaking Human, the official podcast of Monsters Unlimited, a creative agency with a business brain. I'm Shad Conley, Communications Director at Monsters Unlimited, and without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, you two! Oh, wait, you two couldn't make it to the podcast today. They had another event. Sorry about that. Oh. And along with that, anybody listening right now can download an episode of Speaking Human podcast free on iTunes.
Nice. Yes!
Who doesn't have a good giveaway? Introduce yourself real quick.
I'm Patrick Jebber, Creative Director at Monsters Unlimited, and the one guy who doesn't care for Apple products. Psych! I'm bringing Psych back.
Yeah, nice use of Psych. So if this is your first time checking out the podcast, our goal on Speaking Human is to simplify complex marketing topics. We toss aside all the buzzwords and mumbo-jumbo to focus on how marketing can bring products and people together. And that is beautiful. Before we get started on today's show, we just have a couple of quick notes. We got a lot of great feedback on our last episode where we talked about realestate.com.au and their marketing campaign with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Episode 24, find in the iTunes store. We got a lot of Twitter love from listeners in Australia, which was pretty cool. REO Group, the media company behind the campaign, tweeted out a link to the podcast. So that was pretty awesome. And we also got a Twitter response from, and I'm going to try not to butcher this name, Cosette Panique, who informed us that the Austria-Australia confusion that was the basis of that campaign that we talked about a little, that's a real thing. We didn't know if it was actually a real thing, but she says it is. So thanks for those tweets. That was great. And we've included both their Twitter handles in the show notes. And you can also, make contact with us on Twitter @ThinkMonsters. So that's all. I just want to mention that real quick. Now let's get back to the business at hand because we got a lot to talk about. On today's episode, we share our thoughts on Apple's latest announcement extravaganza and discuss the marketing and PR power of the product launch event. So let's get into it.
Of course, Apple Watch works with iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus, but we've also designed it so that it will work with iPhone 5, iPhone 5C, and iPhone 5S. This means that over 200 million people already can use Apple Watch.
So what you just heard there was an audio clip from the September 9th Apple event, which actually just took place minutes before the recording of this podcast. So it's almost real time. We're fresh from the event, and hopefully our thoughts aren't too frazzled here. Patrick, before we get into the conversation, you want to give us a little background on the sort of the history of Apple's announcement event or their product events?
Yes, I can do that. It should come as no surprise that Apple has mastered the art of product announcements and product hype. Since the early days of Steve Jobs, yes, the late Steve Jobs, they've carefully crafted these product announcements, or some call them keynotes, between the notorious company secrecy leading up to the product launches to the sporadic quote-unquote unauthorized leaks of what they might release, and the relentless rumor mill. Apple has built up so much popularity in their annual events that they don't really need to do much advertising or publicizing of the products themselves. They let the media do that for them. Just take a look at the photo on our show notes page, the one of the media camped outside the event. We snagged that from Apple's website. It's crazy. It's like every company's wet dream, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, it's completely wild. I mean, they're just lined up like werewolves ready for meat. I don't know if that was a great metaphor, but, people are just like drooling over this thing.
Yeah. And so it goes. Apple releases a product each year, if you're not familiar with the tech industry. And since the Apple One in 1976 to the iPhone 6 in 2014, they've been releasing these products annually, or relatively close to. And some have been misses, but since the very first iPod in 2001, I'd say, personally, they've been generally on a winning streak.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah. So that's just a little, I mean, I gave a little history of the product launches and the events, but
That's the basics on it. Now, are you, I know you're an Apple fan, as most of our listeners probably know. Are you a fan of this event? Is this something you follow regularly?
I'd say with pretty good regularity, I've followed it. The last couple products, the iPhone 5S, and I mean, they weren't huge product announcements. So, I mean, we knew that there were going to be updates and things like that. But this event, I was a little bit more interested in than the last couple.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. And there seemed to be a little more hype around it, like something bigger was kind of happening. It's kind of a reminder of some of the great past ones. Let's dive right into the meat of this thing. What do you think were some of the top highlights?
Yeah, well, I'll go in order of the way they announced them. They won't exactly be in order of the importance in terms of the way I see them. The iPhone 6, what I would call steps beyond the current iPhone.
That's kind of one of an honorable mention for me. It wasn't the focus of this thing, but I really liked the new design of that with the rounded edges.
Yeah.
The way there's no distinct edges, I guess, as they called it.
Yeah, it reminds me of the first iPhone. And I really liked the first iPhone.
You were probably the first person I know who had an iPhone.
Steve Jobs gave me he said, I'm going to give you my iPhone so you will have the first iPhone.
Yeah, it's really believable.
So then my second is the Apple Pay. In my opinion, going to really change everything for everyone. And it takes a giant like Apple to spearhead this technology and this type of initiative to get everybody to jump on board.
Yeah, and I will say the Apple Watch, which I'm sure you'll get to, is the big spotlight, the glamorous thing they talked about. But this actually might be the most important thing they talked about, the thing that changes technology a lot more than that.
Yeah, the transactional process. If you could change that to make it easier for people, that is what's going to change lives.
And don't you look forward to the day when you don't have to have both a smartphone and a wallet in your pocket? Maybe you can just carry one.
Man, that's going to be awesome. So,
yeah, that's a game changer. So anyway, moving on.
So the Apple Watch, we have to talk about that. And I think they did a great job of coming to market in a new product category for them. The watch is cool, and I think it has a ton of features that it sets apart from other players in the space. They put a lot of thought and effort into making it very, very easy.
That was probably my number one. The Apple Watch was just, like I said, they spent 45 minutes talking about this thing and all these different aspects of it. And if you've seen any of the sort of wearable tech or the watches they've come out with so far, it's basically like the cell phones before the iPhone. They all look like junk. They've done their patented thing where they make it simple. They take this little screen and made it easy for you to look at stuff and do these different things. It screams vintage Apple to me. That's what they do to get people to embrace something. And I always thought wearable tech is I was like, it's not for me. And then I see that, the Apple Watch, I'm kind of like, yeah, I might get one of those. I might wear one of those.
From a business standpoint, I mean, how genius is it that they're releasing a new product in a product category that you need? There are other products, and the fact that the watch needs the phone to work, it's genius. I mean,
yeah, it's like everything else. Once you get an iPhone or start using iTunes and start using all that stuff together, even if you want to switch, it becomes so difficult. You're like, it's too much. All my stuff's here. I'm used to using this. Like it's like the mafia. Once you're in, you're in.
What I'm so confused is, what do you mean if you wanted to switch? I don't know what you mean.
I don't know why you would, but let's say hypothetically if you did. Let me throw this at you real quick. Something I noticed, right? Apple Pay, Apple Watch. Are we done with the eye? Is the eye over?
Oh, that's a good point. And I think it's something that a lot of people are probably going to have a hard time moving away from, because in the office, we were talking about during the event as we were watching it, and people were even referring it to the iWatch, even though they never made mention of iWatch. So
yeah, I thought for sure it would be iPay, iWatch. So when they were calling them, Apple Watch, Apple Pay, I was like, maybe they're like, all right, we're over the eye.
Yeah.
So the other, top highlight for me, the way this thing starts up, the epicness of the whole thing, the way they put it together, like that opening video they played and the music they played and their lighting and their sets, they just make it so big. You're just drawn right in when you start watching this thing. I'm kind of like, I've seen a few of these, but then once you start watching, you're like, whoa. And even how they, put together, it's so smooth and conversational when they're walking across the stage. But yet they go into videos and they have live demos and they have music playing. It's just all so well put together on such a grand scale that it blows me away.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's dive into that a little bit. Why does Apple do these events so well? Why are they such a draw for people? Why do you have all those people outside just dying to get in, or all of us on the internet, trying to stream this thing?
Well, I think they know how to play to the hype. They are a company filled with secrecy. So it naturally makes people curious to what they're working on. That tied with the importance of what they bring to the technology table each time they release a new product. Of course, people are wondering, what are they going to release next? How cool will it be? And then that just snowballs. And I think that they really play off of that. I think another big thing is that they make these invite-only events. They invite media and the press and industry geeks because really, who else would you want at the event? These are the people who are your vehicles, and they are the ones that are going to either love or hate your product. You might as well give them like this first-class access so they feel loved and appreciated. I mean, get them on your side. That way, when they're writing their article or blog or column or blah, 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 or podcast, they focus on the positives more so than nitpick the negatives.
Yeah, they always create this aura that something amazing could happen there. Like you don't want to miss it because you feel like something, even the ones where you're like, the iPhone 5S, not much is happening. They're always in the back of your mind. You're like, but maybe something amazing could happen. And that's kind of the aura they create around it. And you're right, they just wrap the whole thing in mystery so that and I'm sure that started out more as like, we don't want our competitors to know about our technology. But I think now it's as much about the less we talk about it, the more other people will talk about it. Now, let me ask you this, delving into the negative just a little bit. Do you think these events are growing stale at all? Do you think Apple should consider doing something different or kind of changing it up? I mean, they've been doing the same thing year after year. It's always the same event structured in the same sort of way. Do you think they should change it at all?
Well, let me take you back, Shad.
Take me.
I'm going back, way back. I'll be the first to admit that I was a big Steve Jobs fan. And he had this aura about him that radiated enthusiasm for the products. And he really got people excited about them. And I think of it like that friend, right? The friend that you have that has a really contagious laugh. If you've ever gone to the movies with him or her and watch a semi-funny movie and laughed harder when they laughed, mostly because their laugh is infectious, right? And the movie itself may not even be that funny, but that person brings it to a whole new level for you. And that's kind of what Steve Jobs did for the Apple products, I think, when he was around. He got people to buy into how cool these products were. And most of the times it worked. He had this love for what he was doing, and it showed through not only in the products, but then also in the presentations like this, the product presentations or announcements. So back to the original question, I think it's a matter of how excited they are about the products. And you could see that in those presentations today, how important it is what they're doing and how it changes the world. Does that make sense?
That makes absolute sense. And I think I saw that too in the way they were presenting today. You touched on something. Let me follow up on that a little bit. Steve Jobs. Today when you were watching this, did you think about Jobs at all? Did you kind of miss the Jobs vibe a little bit?
I think everyone has probably felt that way since, he had something about him, this charisma that really made the events. It just added that one more thing. But I think Tim Cook has definitely come into his own.
Yeah, and I think Cook does just fine. It's just you have those mighty shoes. So there were times every once in a while where I was like, he's excited about it, but you kind of, I wonder how Jobs would have presented this. It's just an interesting thing. My thinking, it's so weird. I had this question in mind before I watched the thing, and my answer was, before watching today's event, I'd say yes. Based on my memories of the past couple, maybe they should find a different way of doing something kind of more creative or different with it, just changing it up at least for a year just to find out what happens. And then I watched today's event. They're fine. They're doing just fine. They're still doing it so well. People are still so interested. It would make almost no sense to do anything different at this point.
You just look at the spectacle that ensued today and the hype that's built up before the event. It's enough to get anyone really interested in what they're going to show off. Of course, if they consistently announce duds, they might have to rethink their product announcements, obviously, but I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Yeah, this one was so much bigger. It felt like there was so much more to it, like more weight, more actual meat on the bones than some of these past couple. I feel like if there's one change I'd make, maybe if I just had an update to the iPhone, I wouldn't have the event. You still want that buzz, but you just kind of leave them like a little disappointed the past few. because they don't have anything big or game-changing. Let me ask you one thing I forgot about, just to bring up real quick. It's a real side note. U2. What did you think about U2?
What better way of getting people to love your event than giving everyone this album?
Are you going to download the album?
Maybe I'll wait till after October when it's not free and I'll just pay for it.
I want the artists to get their money, man.
Absolutely.
All right, so wrapping this up here, what can companies learn from the big Apple event?
I'd say how you can learn from an Apple event is, number one, you build the excitement around your event and be excited about it. You might not have products like Apple or services like Apple, but, they built this excitement around it. The executive team this morning was busy tweeting. And, as is routine for major Apple product announcements, they took the Apple online store was down for several hours prior to the event. I mean, these are all things to build up hype and build up excitement. I think that's the first thing you should probably do. Would you agree with that?
I would totally agree. I think excitement and enthusiasm no matter what you're doing with your marketing makes all the difference. I mean, we know that from some of the stuff we worked on. And from my side, the thing I thought about was make sure you have something of weight and substance. The more you do, the more people will want to listen. But if you're putting together an event, you don't have to go like epic like Apple. Do something kind of interesting to make the people who go to it, be engaged, be entertained, be interested by what they're seeing. And obviously, if you have a good announcement, whether that's a product or, press event, whatever it is, at its core, that's kind of the key. Don't create an event around half news is what I always say.
Well, that's definitely crucial. I mean, if you don't have anything, then obviously people aren't going to be interested.
And get out.
Yeah. So some of the other things, I think they did well. They invited people. So they make it seem exclusive to actually come to the event itself. They make people feel like this is something that you're not going to get anywhere else. When they go to the event, they get hands-on with the products after the event is over.
It's all these things you can do to just make the event more interesting, give people, especially within the media, more word to spread, more to talk about with the event, not struggle to be like, what was interesting at this thing. And
the last thing, if I can give one more thing, is be prepared. We were talking about this earlier, and I said I was going to come back to it, but nothing can ruin a great event like technical glitches, an unprepared speaker, or worse, a product not performing exactly as planned. They've got this down, and they've got it rehearse and prepare for everything in these scenarios. And I can remember one time going back to Steve Jobs where he was announcing something on stage and there was a technical glitch when he was going through it. Either the video didn't work or something, the Wi-Fi didn't work, and he paused. And then he made a joke about the momentary glitch, and it came off as not a big deal to the audience, where it could have been if he had let it get him, off his game, and the audience soaked it up and he went on his merry way with a successful finale. So I say don't let those kinds of things trip you up. Be prepared for anything, and then don't get frazzled if everything doesn't go perfectly, but you should still prepare for those things. So even if they don't, it doesn't even seem like anything happened.
I agree with that completely. The one attribute of greatness I always think about is they make it look easy and casual, and that's the way these presentations are. They just walk around on stage. They're very conversational. Clips just play as they cue them. Everything happens as it's supposed to, and it seems so easy. But anything that seems that easy is usually incredibly hard behind the scenes. There's so much that goes into it and so much strategy. So it's not like you just get up there and do it. You prepare. So anyway, I think that's it. There's a whole lot to that event. Like I said, we just watched it, so we're still kind of processing the whole thing. But a lot of good information today, I think.
I actually just love technology and simplicity, and I think that they do it really well. If it had been another company that had done it, I'd probably be a fan of them,
You're saying you're not endlessly, universally devoted to Apple? Is that what I heard?
No, you didn't hear that.
And on that note.
So that's it for today's show. You can find current and past episodes of the podcast at speakinghuman.com. You can also subscribe to the Speaking Human podcast in the iTunes store.
Email us with your thoughts on the latest Apple event. What do you think of the products and presentation today, or any questions or comments? Feedback@thinkmonsters.com. That's feedback@thinkmonsters.com. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Speaking Human. Catch you then, humans.
Speaking Human.
Today's been super. I want to thank everyone for coming.